chapter 5, the lines of approach and action. Did anyone have any reactions to the chapter?
Yeah, they're talking about some of this organization that helps that is too many to mention in this book,
Uh-huh.
and all the meetings that took place in Rio de Janeiro and Canada. I never heard of those.
One in Montreal, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and none of them they can come out with a good solution. To change the fossil fuel with something something will not harm the environment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the bus in Oregon, they're using instead of gas, um, it's extracted from the corn. I don't know what they call that. It's from the corn plant. The corn.
Uh-huh. Right.
That that's they replace it with all the buses. The public transportation.
Uh-huh.
They changed with that fuel instead
In
of the gas.
Seattle?
Oregon.
No. Oh,
Portland,
uh-huh.
Portland, Oregon. Because
Oh,
it
in
will tell
Portland.
you, in the back the name. I just forgotten the name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I used to ride the train, and I
Mhm.
saw the buses all the time, and in the back of it, it said something fuel,
It's like biofuel. Is that
something
it?
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, from the corn.
Yeah.
I don't know how they make it from the corn, but anyway, it's clean. It doesn't smell. It's not
Mm-hmm.
the regular gas. That
Right.
you can smell it really, really bad.
Yeah. That's a really good solution,
Right. That's one of the
actually.
solutions I think is really good, but I don't
Yeah.
think
I mean, it's
they
completely
adapt.
renewable.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But if everybody just do something, I mean, there's a lot of people doing something, but not enough, according to this chapter. Not enough.
Right. I mean, there have been small steps, but
Yeah,
what really struck me in reading it is for, given the extent of the crisis and given the danger that our planet faces, how much the United States, first of all, how much the United States is a contributor to the problem,
right. Yeah,
probably, certainly the major contributor to the problem, how much we've actually backtracked over the last 4 years so that we're a much greater contributor to the problem now than we were 4 years ago,
right.
and how much Christians in particular are contributing to the problem. And, finally, how polarized we are over these basic issues that, indicate that we're going to continue to be a contributor to the problem, and that, where there are solutions proposed, there's going to be really staunch resistance
I know.
for
Yeah,
quite some time. And that's very disturbing. And in many ways, I wouldn't necessarily, but the presence of Christians in leading the opposition to the movement against climate change and the movement against protection of the environment and the movement against the attempt to ensure or recognize the dignity of human life is very, very disturbing.
Um,
I think that's the last thing in their mind is human life. You know.
did, did, do either one of you watch Como News?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Do you, Connie?
No, huh?
Tonight they have, every Monday they have a thing called Spotlight on America.
Uh-huh.
And tonight they had one by chance exactly on environmental issues.
Uh-huh.
And it was about cancer causing chemicals released in
Right.
it, the chemical was benzene, and it was released from a Superfund site in New Jersey through the floodwaters from Hurricane Irene in 2011. So it's talking about all these different Superfund sites all over this country.
Uh-huh.
47 states that have Superfund sites
Wow.
out of 50 mainland states.
Yeah.
47 have Superfund sites, and they are generally in communities that are poor
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, compromised areas are usually in the near poor. And and Hurricane Harvey devastated Texas, and the San Jacinto Superfund site near Houston was breached by floodwaters also.
Mm-hmm.
So with every one of these hurricanes, there's devastation of just spreading these chemicals.
Right. Right.
Well, Texas said that when they closed when the after they harvest the oil and they close that, they need to cap that. Right now, it's emitting gas, to
Right.
the atmosphere,
Right.
and the government in Texas, they're not doing anything about it.
Right.
And I think that's one of the issue that brought out by the president before, to do that, to cap all those oil, oil, whatever you call that, that's not being used anymore.
The oil rigs,
Yeah, but there's no more oil, so they're not using it anymore. But it's
yeah,
emitting this gas all over the atmosphere in Texas, and I'm sure it's not just only Texas; it goes all over the place.
Right.
Gas. Yeah,
Right. I think it's emitting methane.
yeah, yeah,
Right. Yeah. Actually, I read an article not that long ago about methane emissions from, particularly from the areas of hydraulic fracking.
yeah. Yeah, wow.
and that causes cancer. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
says in the next 20 years, 876 Superfund and other hazardous sites could be at risk of flooding,
Uh-huh.
only taking into account a low sea level
Yeah,
rise projection.
yeah,
Florida, New Jersey, and New York are hotspots of particular concern.
Right.
Millions of people live within 5 miles of a Superfund site.
Right. There's also, um,
And these are communities of color and low income. Yeah.
yeah, there's also on the Hudson about, I don't know how far, not that far, 10 miles perhaps north of West Point.
mhm,
So that's roughly within, an hour or something of the city. There's a disabled, deactivated nuclear power plant, but I don't know, what deactivization means.
Means
I think that uranium is still stored there,
stuck.
and it's
Right. Yeah.
still radioactive for quite some time, but
That's
it's
bad.
also built on an earthquake fault
Oh,
of all
gee.
clever things. I
Oh
mean,
my,
there
Almighty.
hasn't been an active earthquake in Manhattan, in New York,
Oh,
in the New York City region for a long time, but that doesn't, that for a long time does not mean forever going forward. So, um, but so, but even, yeah, I mean, so this is in many ways really in some ways a hard chapter to read, not so much because it was, sort of difficult to understand, is that it's in many ways sort of flatly depressing.
yeah.
The,
Exactly.
I mean, and I kept thinking, so here, the things that the Holy Father identifies as being problems or obstacles have emerged over the last 5 years or so in full force. So
It's not
um,
getting better.
so he talks at one point about, let me see if I can find what he said. Well, he said that the real focus of economics and politics has to be on the common good and on human fulfillment. And so he took the economic crisis of 2007 and 2008 kind of as a model of what
Yeah.
not to do.
hmm,
So saving the banks at any cost. And so if we sort of look at it, in the economic crisis, the banks were bailed out,
Yeah.
at it with a huge amount of money. There was ultimately no real responsibility assigned to them. They should have been, fined ridiculous sums of money for their malfeasance. And instead of them, or, or in addition, well, instead of that, they were quite, their independence was quite rightly curtailed in a number of areas. So, sort of limits were placed on the kinds of trading they could do, and on the kind of loans they could bundle. And, there was sort of greater, it was an attempt to, make greater disclosure in lending laws and to make it clear
Yeah.
what the implications of particular kinds um, of loans meant,
That they can
especially
be.
given that those loans were typically given out to the poor,
Yeah.
who then were foreclosed and lost their homes.
Yeah.
And so the Holy Father's position there is that that's not didn't go far enough and didn't really address the problem. But the problem is that here the response to those sets of restrictions is that they were too restricted, right? So the position under Trump is that we're curtailing the right of business to operate, and we're cutting into the profits of business and the banks,
Yeah.
and in that way slowing economic growth, which is unacceptable. So all of those restraints and restrictions were eliminated, and we're now basically back to laissez-faire just in the same way we were before the crisis of 2007 and 2008. And so similarly, over the last 4 years, the general position has been that, business should operate, the business world, the financial world should operate without restriction, without restraint, so that they can make the most money
This is
possible.
chapter 189. I see that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
So,
just like it's just like this trailer park that we live in. When we first move in, it's only a 525 a month for the space,
yeah,
and then every year in June they raise it $10 more. But this time they're raising it $15.
uh-huh,
How in the world these people in fixed income, Social Security, can afford, you know, now it's 600 now,
right,
600. And then me and Corey was talking about it yesterday. He said, oh, from now on they're probably gonna do that. They're gonna raise it $15 every year. So pretty soon it's gonna be $1,000. And some people only have $1,000 Social Security.
yeah,
How they're gonna live in? How what food and electricity? You have to pay for electricity. So
Mhm.
it's they need to put a cap on stuff like that.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Government needs to do something about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's too bad. There's no restriction, like you said. So
right,
corporation makes more money.
yeah, there are no restrictions, and the focus is on, the focus is on, the focus is on profit, which with the
Profit
assumption that profit itself is good,
for
but
them.
for them, the profit itself is only good if it serves worthwhile goals.
Yeah.
Well, with us, we're self-governing our HOA, right?
Mm-hmm.
People within the community. But the problem is they don't charge for water usage.
Uh-huh.
So people can use as much as they want and they don't get charged.
Right.
So every year we get an increase in our HOA, which right now is at 515
Per
Oh my,
month.
that's a
per
lot
month,
of money. Wow.
per month.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and it just keeps going up until you finally either get a reverse mortgage so that it'll cover that. And then when you move out or if you die, then that'll be taken out of your property.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a silly arrangement given that water is expensive.
No kidding,
And
right?
and if you
You pay for
the
water.
I mean the
Thing
cost of water
right.
necessarily limits its use if you have to pay for it yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
I
And
mean,
that's
I'm very careful with water since you can
yeah.
Since you're
easily
paying for
run
it.
up a bill of several $100s a month.
Exactly.
And this dear black man in our community said, why don't you charge us for the water and then that way we can bring down our
That's
fee,
the way.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah. But no, they didn't want to do that. They said no. Right now, we agreed that we were going to make it free for everybody, so we're just going to leave it at that for a while. And there was a question as to whether or not we would ever have reduced rates. And they said, well, realistically, the cost of living keeps going up, so probably not.
But you can eliminate HOA, you know.
Huh?
You guys can eliminate HOA
We
if you
can
want.
eliminate it?
Yeah. Yeah, just gather some group, you know, because the HOA is run by people from your community. Because we have that in Hillsborough. We have an
There's
HOA too.
208 units here, so
How many?
208.
Yeah. The same as when we live in Hillsborough, we have like 300 something houses.
Yeah.
Yeah. There,
Well, if it keeps going up, I'm sure. I
yeah,
mean, I mean, I can see both sides of it. You know, they say that if you don't have much debt and your reserves are good,
yeah,
people, that makes your place more desirable by the community, by
yeah.
whoever's buying.
I just heard from our neighbor there that because we are in touch with our neighbor in Hillsborough, they just eliminated the HOA.
Really?
Yeah, you can do that.
That would be
It's
nice.
yeah, people that runs the HOA is in your own community.
Yeah, they're in our own community.
Right.
We hire them.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can, I think you can vote them out of the
right.
HOA out of existence, but
Yep,
if
exactly.
you do have to come up with some means of covering the
Have
functions
to,
that the HOA provides and financing those
Right. Yeah,
functions.
you know,
yeah.
it has to be it started with a group, you know, we get gathered group together like they did in our old housing. They eliminated them because they're not really doing a lot of um, good things for the community, you know.
Yeah, here our HOA has been very good,
Yeah,
although, that we only pay, I mean, it depends on how much per year. Um, I mean, it varies per year, so
yeah,
it actually, I mean, it's both gone up and down depending on, what they anticipate the coming
yeah,
year's expenses to be, but it's been reasonable, and it largely has gone to maintenance of the sort of common areas of
right,
the
yeah,
development, and things like that. So it's actually been quite good,
yeah,
but
Well, I've
there are
been,
also HOA horror stories.
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes, like
There's disadvantage and advantages, you know.
legal suits and stuff like that. So we
Yeah,
don't have any of those. But the thing is, it was like advertised at 366 when I first moved in 5 years ago. And when I finally closed on this place, it was actually 390 and has gone up to 515 since.
yeah,
Oh, wow. That's a
You
lot
know,
of
it
money.
just keeps going up and up and up.
yeah,
Anyway, but I mean, I was just trying to show the thing about the water,
Yeah,
and that's not really a very responsible way
yeah,
of holding on to our water reserves if
no,
people are being charged. Um, well, they are in a way, but you know,
we pay our water.
we're not being very conscious of it.
The only thing that we don't
right,
pay in HOA is the water that they use to water the grounds, the common area, and the one in front of your house, they water that. But we have our own bill for our own water
Yeah,
usage.
we don't have a water bill at all. Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Anyway, sorry about that, but yeah.
It's okay. It's related to what we're talking about. You know, this.
yeah. I mean, it's in many ways very related. I mean, it's an example of um, consumption
Right. Yeah.
being separated from the responsibility for what you're consuming.
Exactly.
And that's sort of that's one of the major problems here, that what we consume is made out of resources that come from somewhere, that are produced by people, and we see the finished product. Often the people who produce the things that we're consuming are exploited
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
mistreated. Often they work in untenable working conditions.
Mhm.
If they don't work in what are explicitly untenable working conditions, they often work in conditions in which they're, exposed to, um, environmental pollutants and hazardous substances, and the underlying problem there, which Pope Francis kind of hints at in the last section on science, is
Mhm.
that the limits of scientific knowledge remain extensive, and we don't know, particularly since if we look at it historically, we're in the early period of using a whole lot of substances and exposing people to a whole lot of substances. We don't really know have a very good idea of what things are carcinogenic
Right.
and what things aren't. So the extent of exposure to carcinogens may be much greater than we, even think or suspect. And so we see this finished product. We have a company that aims at making a profit, that produces this finished product. They make a profit. The economy, the wheels go around, and isn't it wonderful? And then, we buy this product. We live in a society in which one's affluence is measured by one's ability to waste. So the height of success is when you can throw it into the garbage,
Oh,
right? And there's what permeates this is, that the corporate mentality is that my profit matters.
yeah. That's the only thing.
What permeates individual mentalities is that my right to consume matters.
Mm.
And everything is about, either the individual corporation, which under George W. Achieved the status of individuals. So we can now recognize that corporations are people and therefore should be treated with the same dignity as human beings, because they are a form of human life. I'm, being facetious here, although that is the logical conclusion of
According to them, right?
according to the conservative Supreme Court.
Right.
So, so, and so related to all of that, I mean, for me, what I find most galling about all of this, is the Christian opposition to the notion that the climate is changing, which turns Christians into spokespeople, mouthpieces of corporate greed and individual consumption.
Well,
And so,
yeah.
so what this is really is a form of idolatry. What this is worship of mammon and worship of material goods and worship of convenience. We can express it as worship of Aphrodite.
But I didn't see that part about the Christians being blamed for that.
He didn't blame the Christians, but in the contemporary United States, Christians are a major part of the opposition to the environmental movement and the movement against, that resists climate and environmental degradation. It's,
I
you
think we
remember from the
there's
first,
climate change. I don't, whether they whether they admit it or not is one thing, but I think we can see that there is a big climate change going on. I mean, there's cracks in the ice, in the icebergs that are up north. The
I mean,
That's the
I
sad
mean,
part.
on the one hand,
melting.
on the one hand, it would be good. On the one hand, you're right. It's obvious. On the other hand, we also in that first class, we discussed, the pattern of denial that the science isn't agreed
Yeah.
on, even though it's well established that, I mean, there's, mouthpieces um, for evil are always able to find a justification. And I think really the sad thing, and we hear from these very same people about how evil is confused with good and good is confused with evil, but they see themselves as good, and everybody else, all of these people who are trying to curtail our consumption and slow down our economy and reduce profit are evil. People who want universal health care are evil, but
Yeah.
they're predominantly the ones who have confused good and evil. So
I came from socialized medicine, but
Canada.
we didn't always get the best of care.
no,
And what was available wasn't always the best of the solution for whatever was wrong.
no, you don't always get the best of care, but the big thing is you do get some care.
Yeah.
Get some care.
The big problem is that here it's quite possible to get no care.
Well, and over there, they spend more time on prevention than they do on
Cure.
cure. Yeah.
Right. Here, prevention is not a priority.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
the problem.
so you cannot be prevented. And once you get whatever it is, you also can, especially in poor areas, and if you're poor, you can easily get no care. And
That's true.
and even if you're insured, there is this discussion, when has constantly been this sort of discussion about universal health care and the death squads and government bureaucrats being death squads. So a while ago, my Vanessa's uncle had lung cancer, and so he was really someone who had lived an amazing life, and was someone who Vanessa and I both really loved. He had played baseball in the Negro Leagues professionally, and he had hit over 300 in his career. He was like an outstanding baseball player, and then he became a really great sax jazz player. So in any case, he had lung cancer, and so we went to see him, and I didn't really like the way he was his medical treatment. They were fundamentally doing nothing for him, but letting him lie in a bed to die. So I called up the insurance company and spoke to this person who was the kind of responsible person for whatever his care, and she said, "Oh, I didn't know he had any relatives."
Oh no.
Oh my gosh.
So in other words,
So, I mean, so the important takeaway here is that this isn't a government bureaucrat, right? This is like, you know, a Medicare Advantage type healthcare plan. This is
yeah,
a death squad.
yeah.
This is a death squad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ron, what happened to that insurance, Ron?
The
They
insurance? Yeah, what did they do? Nothing?
they decided that they would give him radiation,
Oh,
but so,
that
you
didn't
know,
help. It was too
yeah,
late.
but it didn't help. And
It's probably too late. They should have done it long, you know.
yeah, they should have done it earlier. And also, I think in all probability, chemotherapy might, I mean, I don't really know, but I
Yeah.
suspect chemotherapy might have been, you know, a better option. The sort of real issue is how do we,
Prevent that.
yeah, I mean, how, we live in a world in which things matter, money matters,
Yeah.
stuff matters, the smooth operation of the economy matters, profits matter, but life in its various forms doesn't matter. Human life doesn't matter.
Yeah. Seems like
Animal life doesn't matter. Plant life doesn't matter. None of it matters. It's all about people are useful to the extent that they consume and they produce. So they're, sort of ciphers that enter into the equation, but otherwise they don't matter. Plants, animals, and raw and elements, ores, and whatever are raw materials, so they matter as raw materials. And other than that, none of it matters.
seems like
And
that.
and people have a mindset that none of it matters. That, well, not completely. Nobody would agree that none of it matters. Most of us, or at least most Americans, would agree that I matter.
Yeah.
Not me, not me personally, but
Right.
they themselves, the one individual matters, and everybody else is expendable. Well, not completely everybody else, because you need all of those ciphers to produce your stuff,
Yeah.
but and to make sure you get fed, but you know, they themselves don't matter. And um, and we see that in every sphere of activity, in economic life, in political life, in social life. Um, and it's really, really shocking. And we also see it from Christianity,
Mm.
which is, troubling. Going back to, that earlier, our first session with the surveys on climate change, with 80% of evangelical Christians not believing in
Yeah.
climate change and
Right.
Catholics being split about 50-50.
Mm.
And other mainline denominations like Lutherans and Calvinists being a little bit better, so 60-40 perhaps, but not good.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't think we're gonna get it 100%.
no,
No.
we'll sort of never get it to be 100%, but the question is really how to proceed in the midst of enormous opposition, and probably in this country growing opposition. We've had the emergence of a really powerful right wing
Mm.
that is, opposed to, um,
Eliminating the fossil fuel. That's one of them, right?
yeah, is opposed to, well, I mean, it's opposed to, it stands on a platform of xenophobic nationalism. Um, and so one of the things, that the Holy Father argues is that those who have contributed most to the crisis are responsible for paying the greater proportion of costs of the crisis.
Yeah.
That translates into us. And I don't think
We're
that's a
having problems
message.
ourselves.
What, what Carmen?
And our country is having problems itself.
Yeah. And so, nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah,
But the reality is it's just and
sure it is.
ethical.
Yeah.
Um, so xenophobic nationalism, which denies that people outside of our boundaries are human at all, like Mexican men, for example, are all rapists, as our illustrious former president has told us. Um, Restrictions on business are harmful. The fewer people who vote, the better.
Mm.
The lives of people of color are not important. Only white lives matter. And so given that, you know, really the drip to fascism that we're seeing in our country, and the fact that it's touched a significant proportion of the population, it's very unclear where we can go. Um, Although the Holy Father does identify particularly local activism and local groups as effective, at least within their areas. And we are seeing, I mean, at least there is a commitment from the Biden administration to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, which is really important to restore the EPA. Under Trump, he appointed Scott Pruitt as head of the EPA, and Scott Pruitt was a climate denier who
That's the wrong person.
was all in favor of
Yeah.
letting industry and business do whatever it wanted to do. And also, of course, Scott Pruitt was exceedingly corrupt. And then, weakening water standards and rolling back all sorts of environmental protections that have been passed by every president since Nixon.
Yeah.
So, taking us back over half a century in terms of environmental protection and environmental safeguards. Really a stunning setback. So, I mean, some of that will be reversed, but the damage that we've done in 4 years has probably been incalculable.
Yeah.
And all done in, to worship Mammon. So I guess, for me, back to kind of Christianity, and maybe I kind of keep mentioning this too often, but what bothers me is the extent to which Christians who should know better
Yeah.
become influenced by idolatry. So we worship Mammon.
Yeah.
You can see it most clearly in prosperity theology. God is gone. God is a servant who produces stuff for us, right? God wants us to live well.
Yeah.
God wants us to think highly about ourselves. Is that the point? I mean, maybe I've missed something, but
We're supposed to be caretakers of our brothers and
Something,
sisters.
miss something in translation.
right, yeah,
Right?
we're supposed to be caretakers of our brothers. We are our brothers and our
Yeah.
sisters' keeper.
Right.
Whether we feel good about it or, I mean, the reality is that when you have a relationship with God, you feel good about everything, even in the worst of circumstances,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Mhm.
if you're suffering, you know that God is present.
Mhm.
If you do something that is, you don't want to do and it's painful, in the end, you know that you've done the right thing
Mhm.
and God is with you in it and God approves of what you've done. If God is present, all of those things become okay. So it's not that I feel good about myself. Thank you, God. It's that God is good, God is great, God is present, and we look to God. We don't, I mean, yes, we should be grateful for what God has done for us,
Mhm.
but what God has done for us is not the end of anything. God is the end of everything. And we've really lost that. It's become about what God does for us. God has become our servant, the thing that meets our desires. And I I just don't think that that's it at all. That that I mean, from my perspective, that's really just a warped understanding, and it's pervasive, unfortunately. So that's troubling. What I really liked, well, actually, I mean, I really liked the whole chapter, although, I mean, it's a rather
Yeah. It's,
depressing chapter, although, I mean, his call to action and the way in which he believes and his general guidelines for the considerations in addressing the crisis are very solid. It's just, I think that they're hard to implement. What I really liked was that last section on religions and dialogue with science.
Mhm.
So he's previously emphasized the importance of scientific research and the importance of science being independent, which is an area of problem of difficulty, since science is typically not independent. Science typically serves especially economic interests, and um, in a very strange way serves political interests as well. We're pretty close to out of time, so uh, should, do we want to continue this next week or move on?
I think there's, let's see. Uh,
I'm sorry, what, Connie?
um, the latter part, what is that? I'm looking. Did we discuss the politics, economy and dialogue for human fulfillment?
We sort of touched on it. We haven't discussed it
Yeah.
in depth.
So I think we should do that next week. What do you
Okay.
Yeah.
think, Carmen?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll
And
do that. Yeah.
then let's also, I
Start.
had mentioned that I really like the religions and dialogue with science. So let's spend a little
Yeah.
bit more
Right. Yeah.
time
Yeah.
on that. I thought that
Yeah.
was really good and a really, I mean, in some ways, a, well, you know, as as Christians, as Catholics,
Yeah.
you know, I think it's our responsibility to not simply, you know, sort of be Catholics, but to
Yeah.
be activist Catholics,
Exactly. Yeah.
and to, you
Not
know,
just say I am a Catholic. Yeah.
and,
Well, what are you
and
doing? What are you
also, you know, to promote a particular revelation of God and who God is,
Right.
and
Yeah.
what that call and a particular emphasis on what God calls Christians to do and
Exactly.
be, as opposed to, you know, I go to mass on
Right.
Sunday, or else I, you know, watch
Yeah.
and that's kind of the extent of the whole thing. Isn't that
Yeah.
nice? So yeah, so let's talk about that next week. So we'll continue with it
Yeah.
next
Okay.
week.
Right.